Hey y'all, tonight we're slipping into the last dawn of an empire. You wake not to the blare of alarms, but to the creak of olive wood shutters, your bare feet pressing against cool marble floors as morning light spills over the triple-layered fortifications of Constantinople. It's May 1453, and the air tastes like salt from the Marmara Sea, mixed with the tang of iron. The city's been holding its breath for weeks. The Theodosian walls, those 40-foot tall limestone titans banded with red brick, stretch as far as you can see, their shadows slicing the earth like a blade. Down in the moat, frogs croak in the stagnant water, unaware that in a few days, this 20-meter wide trench will choke on Ottoman corpses. You climb the inner wall's rampart, your fingers brushing mortar made of crushed brick and lime, still gritty after a millennium. From here, the city unfurls, a patchwork of terracotta roofs, gilded domes, and the distant shimmer of the Hagia Sophia. The walls aren't just stone, they're a math problem. Attackers had to solve 3 equations at once: cross the moat, scale the outer wall, then survive the killing field between it and the inner wall, where Byzantine archers once turned the Peribolos terrace into a shooting gallery. Each tower, spaced precisely 175 feet apart, was a calculus of death, polygonal to deflect cannon fire, though no one's told you yet that cannons exist. A breeze carries the scent of time from the countryside, where theme farmers, soldiers who doubled as olive growers, are already tending groves. Funny, isn't it? The same empire that built these walls also perfected tax laws requiring every citizen, rich or poor, to donate a third of their income to maintenance. Even the chariot racing factions, the blues and greens, paused their riots in 447 to rebuild 57 towers in 3 months after an earthquake, fueled by Imperial panic and Attila the Hun's approach. Historians still argue whether that earthquake was divine punishment or luck. After all, the repairs gave us the outer wall we see today. You trace a crack in the masonry, noting how the alternating limestone and brick layers flex like muscle fibers. This isn't just engineering, it's biomimicry. The walls breathe, expanding in summer heat and contracting in winter frost without crumbling. Down at the Golden Gate, the triumphal arch where emperors once paraded, the marble elephants atop its reliefs have lost their trunks to time, but their stone eyes still watch the western horizon. Later, Mehmet II will park his largest cannon here, Basilica, a 27-foot bronze monster that'll fire 1 200-pound stones. Yet even it can't fully breach what Theodosius's architects wrought. A shout echoes, Greek, Turkish, Italian, as mercenaries hoist barrels of Greek fire onto the outer wall. You smell the naphtha, sharp and sulfurous, and remember the stories, how this sticky flame saved the city from Arab fleets in 678, how its recipe was so secret that leaking it meant death. But today, it's just another weapon in a pantry of last resorts. The real magic's in the walls themselves. Did you know the inner terrace's width, exactly 21 meters, was calculated to let defenders roll boulders downhill without hitting their own men, or that the tower's spiral staircases twist counterclockwise to force right-handed attackers to fight uphill with their swords cramped. Byzantine sarcasm flickers as a soldier jokes about the invincible walls. "Tell that to the Fourth Crusade," he mutters, referencing 1204, when Venetians and Franks shattered the sea walls. But everyone knows the land walls never fell. Not to Attila, not to the Avars, not to the Arabs who sieged for 4 years only to slink home, defeated by dysentery and these stones. You lean over the parapet, watching dawn gild the Lycus River Valley. Somewhere beyond those hills, Ottoman tents blot the landscape like fungi. But for now, the walls stand. They always stand. You push through the crowd on the Misi, Constantinople, spine of commerce, where the air thrums with a dozen languages and the clatter of donkey hooves on paving stones. The street's colonnades stretch ahead like a stone ribcage, their shadows sheltering silk vendors from Pontus, amber traders from the Baltic, and a Syrian perfumer whose oils promise to make Cleopatra herself weep with envy. A Genoese merchant in a felt hat sidles up, whispering about Venetian galleys laden with saffron. But you're too busy dodging a slave caravan. Ethiopian youths with iron collars, their eyes downcast as a Bulgar slaver barks prices in lingua franca. The smell hits first: cumin wrestling cardamom, dried fish gutted at dawn, and the sweet rot of overripe melons. You pass the Macros and Bolos, a covered arcade where coppersmiths hammer basins for rosewater baths, their rhythm syncopated by the screech of a caged peacock in a Persian bird seller's stall. A nun haggles over Syrian glass beads, while a Varangian guard, his axe slung over a tunic of Frankish linen, pockets a date stuffed with goat cheese. "Try the Cretan cheese," a shopgirl insists, thrusting a sample at you. It's misitra, sharp and crumbly, made from sheep that graze slopes where Zeus once hid from Hera's wrath. Or so she claims. You pause at the Forum of Theodosius, where the bronze bull statue glares over spice sacks from Malabar. A Coptic trader unrolls a scroll of papyrus, his ink-stained fingers tracing routes to Zanzibar's clove forests. 5 nomismata for a jar, he says, tapping black peppercorns that crackle like distant gunfire. His competitor, a gaunt Armenian with a parrot on his shoulder, scoffs. "That's Ottoman rubbish. Mine's from the Malabar coast. Real pepper, not that Anatolian gravel." Historians still argue whether half the exotic spices here were just local weeds rebranded by entrepreneurial Thracians. A silk merchant from Trebizond unfurls a bolt-dyed Tyrian purple, its hue richer than an empress's funeral shroud. 1 hyperpyron per cubit, he says, smoothing the fabric. You smirk. Purple's been illegal for civilians since Theodosius I, but everyone knows the right bribe lets you swathe your mistress in imperial decadence. Nearby, a cluster of Venetian bankers click abacus beads, calculating interest rates in stolen glances. Their ledger books bulge with debts from emperors and fishmongers alike. proving Byzantium's golden throat is still lined with Lombard silver. The crowd parts for a water seller shouldering an amphora, his cry of psikro, drawing thirsty scribes and cobblers. He serves you a clay cup from a spigot, the water icy from aqueducts built a millennium ago. As you drink, a juggler tumbles past, his ceramic plates spinning, until a stray melon rind sends him crashing into a stack of Cappadocian pottery. The vendor's curse is cut short by the bells of Hagia, Sophia, their bronze tongues calling the faithful to vespers. Merchants cross themselves, Muslims roll prayer rugs toward Mecca, and a rabbi from Chalcedon murmurs psalms over a tray of silver mezuzot. You slip into a side alley where the air thickens with the musk of unwashed wool. A blind ballad singer rasps about Basil the Bulgar Slayer, his lyre missing 3 strings. Coins clink into his cup as he reaches the verse where 15,000 Bulgars are blinded, a crowd favorite. Behind him, a cloaked figure sells relics from a velvet-lined box, a pebble from Golgotha, a thread from Mary's veil, and what's either a saint's finger bone or a chicken tibia. Guaranteed authentic, he croons, winking. I've got a bishop's seal and everything. Dusk stains the sky when you reach the Golden Horn's docks. A Galata shipmaster offers passage to Crimea for 3 hyperpyra and your left boot, while a fishwife guts mackerel with a knife older than Heraclius. The water slaps against hulls from Alexandria, Genoa, and places maps haven't named yet. You pocket a shard of Paphlagonian cherry resin, cheap incense for tomorrow's prayers, and melt into the shadow of a grain silo. Somewhere a lute plucks a Kontakion hymn, its melody swallowed by the bray of a mule loaded with Nicaean wine. The city breathes commerce like a second liturgy, its veins flowing with gold and lies. You step through the bronze doors of Hagia Sophia and freeze, not from reverence, though that comes later, but because the air itself feels different here. It's thicker, sweeter, like breathing honeyed light. Above you, the dome isn't so much a ceiling as a second sky. It's 40 windows, slicing the morning sun into golden blades that stab downward, illuminating swirls of incense smoke. A low hum vibrates in your molars, though no one's singing yet. That's just the building. Hagia. Sophia doesn't house sound. She is sound. A stone instrument tuned over 15 centuries. Your eyes adjust to the shimmer. Every surface breathes gold, not the flat gilt of Renaissance altarpieces, but living gold, mosaic tesserae, angled like fish scales to catch and throw light. Christ Pantocrator glowers from the apse, his right hand raised in blessing or warning. The mosaic's background isn't solid gold, but a tempest of individual cubes, each twisted slightly to refract light from the southern windows. Watch long enough, and the entire image seems to ripple, as if underwater. A trick of the eyes? Maybe. But Procopius wrote the same thing in 537 AD. One might imagine the figures are alive, that the gold moves like water. Voices swell behind you. A cluster of monks in black robes processes toward the solea, their chant syncopated by the slap of sandals on marble. They're singing the Cherubicon, a hymn so ancient its melody predates a musical notation. Let us who mystically represent the cherubim. The first note hits the dome and fractures. Sound ricochets off pendentives, swirls around columns, crashes into the exedre. What began as a single melody becomes a storm of harmonics. Byzantine chant transformed into accidental polyphony by 10-second reverberations. You brace against a porphyry column, suddenly understanding why medieval visitors claimed angels sang here. It's not metaphor. The building duets with the choir, its acoustics stretching each amen into a fading constellation of echoes. A janissary guards the spiral staircase to the upper gallery, his yataghan dagger glinting. You toss him a silver asper and climb, the steps worn concave by a millennium of slippered feet. Up here, the air smells of dust and extinguished candles. This is where empresses watched liturgies, veiled behind marble screens. Run your palm along the balustrade, smooth as a river stone from generations of fidgeting courtiers. Now the quirky bit. Sidle up to the southwestern corner. Press your lips to the cold marble and whisper, Theodora was right. 3 seconds later, a giggle floats back from across the dome. The whispering gallery doesn't care about your secrets. It ferries every word, every suppressed cough to listeners 32 meters away. In 1204, Crusader knights used this trick to coordinate their sack of the city, their Frankish curses bouncing between saints' mosaics. Tonight, it's a Venetian silk merchant flirting with a nun, plus Sachange. Back downstairs, a shaft of light pierces the apse. Right on time, 9 a.m., the winter solstice sun aligning with Hagia Sophia's 33.5-degree orientation. The beam strikes the altar, igniting the Eucharist chalice into a miniature sun. For one breath, the Holy Spirit isn't symbolism, but physics, photons dancing on gold leaf. A deacon swoops in to adjust the cloth, and the miracle dissolves. Don't miss the Islamic additions. Those 8 massive calligraphy discs hanging from the dome, Ottoman sultans installed them in the 19th century. Each black on gold Arabic script, a deliberate counterpoint to the Paleo-Christian mosaics. The largest reads Allah in Thuluth script, its letters shaped to mirror the curve of Christ's blessing hand directly below. Coexistence as architectural pun. As you exit, a docent argues with a grad student about the acoustics. They calculated every angle, she insists. The dome's curvature, the pendentives, it's a harmonic engine. The student scoffs. Please, Justinian's architects were fighting gravity, not composing symphonies. Truth? We'll never know. But stand in the center and clap once. The report doesn't echo. It blooms, unfolding like a steel rose in still air. Accident or genius? Hagia Sophia keeps her secrets. You slip through a side gate into the great palace complex, where the scent of jasmine mingles with the distant clatter of silver spoons on porcelain. The Chrysotriclinos awaits, the golden hall where emperors dine beneath a dome studded with stars of actual gold leaf. Your silk slippers whisper across floors of Proconnesian marble, each vein a frozen river of cream and gray. The walls shimmer with mother of pearl inlay, creating an underwater effect that makes courtiers appear to float rather than walk. A eunuch in purple silk glides past, his perfume trailing notes of ambergris and crushed violets, a scent worth more than most peasants see in a lifetime. The dining ritual unfolds like liturgy. You recline on a cline, upholstered in Tyrian silk, watching as servants present the first course. Sea urchins from the Aegean stuffed with quail eggs and Syrian pistachios. The emperor, let's say it's Constantine XI, though he's dining simply tonight, picks at honey dormice with a golden fork, one of only 12 in existence. Byzantine etiquette demands you wait for his nod before touching your own plate. Miss the cue, and you'll be dining on bread and shame in the servants' quarters. The fork itself is revolutionary. Most of Europe still eats with knives and fingers, but Byzantium's been stabbing food elegantly since the 11th century. A silentiarios announces each dish in ceremonial Greek. Konelime skordo kai dendrolivano. Rabbit braised with garlic and rosemary from the palace gardens. The sauce glistens with garum, that fermented fish paste Romans perfected and Byzantines refused to abandon. It tastes like the sea's deepest secret, salty and umami rich. You chase it with wine from Chios, served in a chalice of carved sardonyx that belonged to Justinian's wife Theodora. The cup's translucent bands catch candlelight, turning your wine into liquid amber. Between courses, a court philosopher debates whether Aristotle's Poetics applies to culinary arts. Consider the catharsis of properly aged cheese. He pontificates, gesturing with a peacock drumstick. His opponent, a visiting scholar from Mistra, counters with Plato's theory of forms. This roasted lamb is merely a shadow of the perfect lamb that exists in the realm of ideas. You suppress a snort. Only in Byzantium do dinner conversations require a philosophy degree. Meanwhile, a juggler tosses crystallized ginger while balancing on a tightrope strung between marble columns. Entertainment that would make Cirque du Soleil weep with envy. The centerpiece arrives, a whole sturgeon from the Danube, its scales replaced with sheets of beaten gold, its cavity stuffed with figs, almonds, and cinnamon from Ceylon. The fish's eyes are cabochon sapphires, and when the carver slices its belly, steam scented with saffron billows out like incense. This isn't just dinner, it's theater. The recipe comes from Apicius's De Re Coquinaria, though Byzantine cooks added their own flourishes, rose petals candied in honey, and a sauce of wine reduced with ground pearls. Yes, actual pearls. Calcium carbonate supposedly aids digestion, though historians still argue whether this was medicine or conspicuous consumption taken to absurd heights. A dwarf in cloth of gold tumbles past, juggling pomegranates while reciting Homer's Odyssey in perfect dactylic hexameter. His performance pauses only when a mechanical golden tree begins to chirp, its bronze birds powered by water pressure from the palace aqueducts. The emperor claps twice, and the birds fall silent. Such automata were Byzantium's calling card, designed to awe foreign ambassadors into submission. Liutprand of Cremona described similar devices in 949. Lions that roared, birds that sang, and a throne that lifted the emperor toward heaven. Tonight's version is subtler, just enough magic to remind you that this empire commands forces beyond mere politics. As the evening winds down, servants present the final course, melamacarono, drizzled with honey from Mount Hymettus, where bees feast on thyme and wild oregano. The pastry crumbles like sweet sand, releasing flavors that dance between earth and sky. You wash it down with retsina, aged in amphora sealed with pine resin, a taste that transports you to sun-baked hillsides where goats browse among olive trees older than Christianity. You wake to the aroma of psomi, bread baking in clay ovens, its crust crackling like distant applause. The palace kitchens bustle with dawn preparations, but you're hunting something more exotic than the emperor's breakfast. Constantinople's cuisine isn't just food, it's a 1,000-year conversation between Rome's discipline, Greece's poetry, and the East's mysteries. Your stomach growls as you follow the scent of cinnamon through narrow streets where bakers knead dough that would make modern artisans abandon their sourdough starters in despair. First stop, a taverna near the Hippodrome where the proprietor, a gap-toothed Cappadocian, serves souvlaki that predates the name by centuries. The lamb chunks sizzle on iron skewers over charcoal made from Pontic oak, each piece marinated in wine, oregano, and crushed coriander seeds. He wraps the meat in lagana, unleavened bread thin as parchment, and drizzles it with scorthalia, a garlic sauce so potent it could resurrect Lazarus. My great-grandfather fed this to Basil II, he boasts, though the math doesn't quite work. Still, the recipe might be authentic. Byzantine military manuals describe similar field rations for theme soldiers campaigning against Bulgarian Khans. You chase the lamb with retsina that tastes like pine forests, distilled into liquid sunshine. The resin isn't just flavoring, it's preservation, allowing wine to survive Mediterranean heat without turning to vinegar. A scholarly debate rages at the next table. Does resin improve wine or mask inferior grapes? The answer depends on whether you're a purist or a pragmatist. Either way, this particular vintage comes from vines planted during Heraclius's reign, their roots deep enough to taste the bones of Persian invaders. Next course, dolmades, stuffed with rice, pine nuts, and currants from Corinth. The grape leaves glisten with olive oil pressed from trees that witnessed the Fourth Crusade. Each bite releases layers, the leaf's bitter tang, rice perfumed with dill, and the sweet surprise of fruit. The technique arrived with Arab traders, but Byzantine cooks refined it into art. Some versions include ground lamb, others stay vegetarian for Lent. Tonight's batch splits the difference with chopped almonds that crunch like tiny prayers between your teeth. A street vendor hawks lucumades, honey puffs that bob in hot oil like golden bubbles. He fishes them out with a bronze skimmer, then drowns them in honey from Attica's slopes, where Hymettus bees work thyme blossoms into liquid amber. The pastry's interior is cloud-light, its exterior crackling with crystallized sweetness. One bite, and you understand why Arab chroniclers called Constantinople the city where even beggars eat like kings. Historians still argue whether these treats originated in ancient Greece or medieval Persia, but your taste buds don't care about provenance. The real treasure waits in a basement tavern where the cook, a former monk from Mount Athos, prepares avgotarajo, botarga, made from gray mullet roe. He slices the amber-colored delicacy paper thin, each translucent wafer bursting with concentrated ocean. Paired with figs and aged casseri cheese, it's umami incarnate. The technique came from Phoenician traders, but monastic patients perfected it. This particular batch, aged for 2 years in sea salt mixed with crushed marble, a preservation method that turns fish eggs into edible gold. Between bites, you sample mastica liqueur distilled from Chios mastic trees. The clear spirit tastes like pine forests kissed by Mediterranean wind, with an anise finish that lingers like a half-remembered dream. Legend claims the trees weep tears of resin only on Chios, though botanists suspect it's just terroir, the island's volcanic soil and sea breezes, creating perfect growing conditions. Either way, the drink burns pleasantly, warming your chest as evening fog rolls in from the Bosphorus. Your final stop, a Syrian confectioner who crafts baklava with 40 layers of phyllo dough, each sheet brushed with clarified butter and sprinkled with crushed pistachios from Gaziantep. The pastry shatters at first bite, releasing honey perfumed with orange blossom water and a whisper of cardamom. It's architecture you can eat, each layer a testament to patience and the belief that some pleasures are worth the effort. As you savor the last crumb, church bells chime compline, and the city settles into its ancient rhythms. You slip into the Monastery of Studios as Vespers begins, where voices rise like incense through stone arches worn smooth by centuries of prayer. The sound hits you first, not harmony as Western ears expect, but something older, stranger. Byzantine chant doesn't climb scales, it flows like water, finding its level, each note connected to the next by invisible threads of tradition, stretching back to David's Psalms. A dozen monks in black robes stand before the iconostasis, their voices weaving together without instruments, without accompaniment, without anything but breath and faith made audible. The protopsaltes raises his hand, and the antiphon begins. Phos hilaron, O gladsome light. His voice cracks slightly on the opening note, a human imperfection that somehow makes the sacred more real. The melody doesn't soar, it undulates, following the natural rhythm of Greek syllables, like waves lapping a familiar shore. No major or minor keys here. These are the 8 echoey modal scales that predate Western harmony by centuries. Each mode carries its own emotional color. Echoes protos for joy, echoes plagios tetartos for penitence. Tonight's chant flows in echoes deuteros, the mode of longing, perfect for a city holding its breath. You lean against a marble column carved with acanthus leaves, feeling the vibrations travel through stone into your bones. This isn't performance, it's prayer made manifest. The monks don't read from sheet music. Notation won't be invented for another few centuries. Instead, they follow neumes, squiggly marks above Greek text that indicate melodic direction without specifying exact pitches. It's jazz notation for the medieval world, requiring singers to internalize vast repertoires through years of repetition. The current domestikos learned these melodies as a boy in Thessalonica, his voice trained by masters who traced their lineage back to John Chrysostom's golden-mouthed sermons. A young novice stumbles on the Alleluia, his voice cracking like a teenager's. The others don't miss a beat, their collective sound absorbing his mistake like water closing over a dropped stone. That's the beauty of Byzantine chant. It's anti-fragile, growing stronger through imperfection. No single voice dominates. The melody belongs to the community. Western polyphony will soon fracture this unity into soprano, alto, tenor, bass. But here now, humanity sings with one throat, one breath, one ancient longing for the divine. The troparia begin, short hymns that punctuate the psalms like jewels set in gold. Christos anesti floats through the nave. Christ is risen. Though Easter passed weeks ago, time moves differently in liturgy. Past, present, and future collapse into eternal now. The monks' voices echo off marble walls, creating natural reverb that transforms simple melody into something approaching the music of spheres. Historians still argue whether Byzantine architects designed churches for optimal acoustics or if the perfect sound is happy accident. But standing here, you suspect the stones themselves learned to sing. A quirky detail. Notice how the monks breathe, not together, but in rotation, each singer grabbing air at different moments so the collective sound never breaks. It's like a medieval version of circular breathing, creating the illusion of infinite breath, endless praise. The technique probably developed by accident. Tired monks gasping for air during marathon services, but it became art through necessity. Some protopsaltes could sustain notes for minutes, their voices floating above the congregation like audible halos. The service reaches its climax with the Trisagion, Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us. The melody spirals upward, each repetition adding intensity without changing pitch. It's hypnotic, meditative, designed to induce theoria, that mystical state where the boundary between singer and song dissolves. Your eyelids grow heavy as the chant works its ancient magic, slowing your heartbeat to match its measured cadence. As the final Amen fades into silence, you understand why Byzantine music never developed instruments. Human voices are instruments enough, reeds of flesh and bone, resonating chambers of ribcage and skull, all tuned to frequencies that predate language itself. The monks file out in silence, their sandals whispering against marble, but the music lingers, trapped in stone arches, waiting for tomorrow's prayers to set it free again. You ride through the Anatolian countryside, where the theme system has transformed soldiers into farmers, and farmers into the empire's backbone. The morning mist clings to olive groves planted in military formation, neat rows that double as defensive positions, each tree a potential cover point for archers. Your horse's hooves crunch on gravel roads built wide enough for supply wagons, but narrow enough to bottleneck invaders. This isn't just agriculture, it's warfare, disguised as pastoral poetry, where every vineyard hides a garrison and every shepherd knows how to use a sling against more than wolves. The strategos of the Opsikion theme greets you at his villa, a modest stone house that could pass for a wealthy merchant's estate. No marble columns or golden domes here, just practical architecture designed to survive Arab raids and tax collectors with equal efficiency. He's sunburned from supervising the barley harvest, his hands calloused from sword practice and plow handles alike. 20 years I've held this land, he says, pouring wine from amphora, marked with his personal seal. Fought the Bulgars at Cleidion, planted these vines. The year after, same soil, different seasons. The wine tastes of limestone and distant battles, its tannins sharp enough to cut glass. His scolai gather for the evening meal, farmer soldiers whose bronze armor hangs beside scythes and pruning hooks. They discuss crop rotation with the same intensity other men debate theology. Barley after fallow, then beans to fix the nitrogen, argues a grizzled Kentarch whose left arm bears scars from a Pecheneg arrow. His neighbor, a young Descartes, barely old enough to shave, counters with newfangled wisdom from Constantinople. The agricultural treatises say wheat every third year, not fourth. The debate grows heated until someone mentions the weather, and suddenly everyone's an expert on cloud formations and wind patterns. The theme system's genius lies in its brutal simplicity. Give soldiers land, and they'll fight to keep it. No mercenaries to pay, no foreign auxiliaries to mistrust. Just men defending their own olive trees and their children's inheritance. Each thema functions as a military district where farmers drill on Sundays and harvest during campaigns, creating an army that literally grows from the soil. The Estratiotica Ctemata, military holdings, pass from father to son ensuring loyalty spans generations. Your host's grandfather fought at Manzikert. His son will probably face Ottoman janissaries. The land endures, the family serves. A quirky detail emerges during dinner. The theme soldiers' wives often know more about military tactics than court generals. They've lived through sieges, organized evacuations, and hidden grain from raiders. The strategisa demonstrates by sketching defensive positions in spilled wine on the wooden table. Arabs always attack from the southeast, she explains, following the old Roman roads. So we plant thorn bushes there and leave the northwest approach open, but with hidden pits. Her tactical knowledge comes from necessity, not textbooks. When your husband spends months campaigning, you learn to defend the farm or lose everything. The evening's entertainment arrives. A traveling rhapsode who recites the Digenis Akritas, an epic poem about border warriors. His voice carries across the courtyard as he describes battles against Saracen emirs and dragon-slaying heroes. The soldiers nod appreciatively. They know these stories aren't fantasy, but thinly veiled history. Every theme has its own Digenis, some local champion who held a mountain pass or broke a siege through cunning and courage. The poem's formulaic phrases help illiterate farmers memorize tactical wisdom disguised as entertainment. Strike the horse, not the rider, becomes a verse about Pegasus. Retreat to higher ground transforms into a tale of eagles and clouds. Historians still argue whether the theme system saved Byzantium or merely delayed its collapse. Critics point to the gradual militarization of civilian life, the breakdown of classical urban culture, the empire's slow transformation into a collection of armed camps. Supporters counter that themes created the most effective military organization since the Roman legions, turning every peasant into a potential soldier and every village into a fortress. Tonight, watching these farmer warriors sharpen swords between discussions of soil pH and rainfall patterns, you suspect both sides are right. As stars emerge above the Anatolian plateau, the strategos walks you to the stable where your horse waits. Tomorrow we harvest the last of the grapes, he says, then drill with spears until the vintage is done, same as always. His voice carries no complaint, only the quiet satisfaction of men who found their place in the world's machinery. The theme system isn't perfect, but it works, transforming the empire's greatest weakness, its vast frontiers, into its greatest strength, an army that fights for home. You enter the scriptorium of the Pantocrator Monastery as dawn light filters through alabaster windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like golden prayers above bent heads. The air smells of vellum, oak gall ink, and the faint musk of sheep, the raw materials of immortality. 20 monks hunker over writing desks, their quills scratching against parchment in a rhythm older than printing presses, older than paper, older than the very idea that knowledge could be mass-produced. Each stroke preserves civilization, one letter at a time, though none of them realize they're saving the Renaissance from intellectual starvation. Brother Maximos, the head scribe, dips his reed pen into ink made from crushed iron and wine. He's copying Aristotle's Metaphysics from a manuscript so ancient its margins crumble at his touch. The original came from Baghdad during the translation movement, when Islamic scholars preserved Greek philosophy while Western Europe forgot how to read. Now it's coming full circle. Greek text returning to Greek hands, though filtered through Arabic commentaries that add layers of meaning like sedimentary rock. His calligraphy flows in minuscule script, those elegant lowercase letters that revolutionized reading by making books smaller, cheaper, and infinitely more portable than the old uncial capitals. At the next desk, a young novice struggles with Plato's Republic, his tongue poking out in concentration as he navigates the philosopher's labyrinthine sentences. A drop of sweat threatens to smudge the word dikaiosine, justice, and he dabs it away with a cloth blessed by the abbot. One mistake could ruin hours of work, since parchment costs more than most peasants earn in a year. The vellum beneath his pen came from calves raised specifically for writing, their hides scraped thin enough to read through, then treated with lime and stretched on wooden frames until they achieved that perfect balance of durability and translucency. The monastery's library holds treasures that would make modern collectors weep. The complete works of Sophocles, including plays lost to time, Archimedes' mathematical treatises with margin notes by Apollonius, medical texts by Galen that won't reach Western Europe for another century. But the real magic happens in the copying. Each scribe adds his own flourishes, corrections, and interpretations. Brother Nikephoros specializes in illuminated capitals, his letter A blooming into a garden of acanthus leaves where tiny birds nest among golden vines. His pigments come from lapis lazuli, ground to powder, cinnabar from Spanish mines, and gold leaf beaten so thin it floats like metallic snow. A quirky detail: the scribes use a punctus elevatus system for punctuation that won't be standardized for centuries. Some prefer dots, others favor diagonal slashes, and Brother Methodios has invented his own symbol, a tiny fish, to mark pauses in theological arguments. Future scholars will curse his creativity, but tonight it seems charmingly personal, like finding a medieval emoji in the margins of eternity. The fish apparently represents Christ, though it looks suspiciously like the mackerel served at yesterday's dinner. The afternoon brings excitement. A merchant from Venice arrives with a commission to copy Ptolemy's geography. The price, 50 gold, hyperpyre, could feed the monastery for a year, but the work will take 6 months of meticulous labor. Brother Maximos examines the exemplar, noting corrections in 3 different hands and margin notes in Arabic, Latin, and what might be Hebrew. This isn't just a book, it's a palimpsest of civilizations, each culture adding its own layer of understanding to ancient wisdom. Historians still argue whether such cross-pollination enriched or corrupted classical texts, but the scribes don't care about academic debates. They're too busy preserving the raw material of human thought. As evening approaches, the monks gather for Hesperinos, but you linger in the scriptorium where Brother Callistos works by candlelight on a secret project, copying banned texts. Tonight it's Julian the Apostates against the Galileans, the emperor's philosophical attack on Christianity. Officially, such works should be destroyed. Unofficially, knowledge is knowledge, and future generations might need to understand their enemies' arguments. His pen moves carefully across the parchment, preserving heresy for posterity with the same devotion he brings to copying psalms. The final image, dozens of completed manuscripts stacked on shelves like sleeping dragons, their leather bindings worn smooth by countless hands. Tomorrow, some will travel to distant monasteries, carrying Byzantium's intellectual DNA to places where Greek learning has been forgotten. Others will hide in monastery libraries, waiting for scholars who won't be born for centuries. But tonight, they're just books, humble, patient, eternal, holding the light of human reason against the gathering dark. You enter the workshop of Master Theodoros, where the air shimmers with gold dust and the scent of heated wax. His fingers stained permanent purple from handling Imperial silk, guide an ivory stylus across a diptych panel depicting the Archangel Michael. Each feather in the angel's wings requires 17 separate cuts, each fold in his robes a meditation on the intersection of divine perfection and human craft. The ivory came from an elephant that died in Ceylon, its tusks carried by Arab traders through Damascus, then Trebizond, finally reaching Constantinople in the saddlebags of a Genoese merchant who probably had no idea he was trafficking in future masterpieces. Theodoros pauses to examine his work through a magnifying crystal, Venetian glass ground to perfection by monks who learned optics from translated Arabic texts. The angel's face measures barely 3 inches, yet every eyelash is visible, every expression line carved with surgical precision. Ivory remembers, he murmurs, running his thumb along the grain. Push too hard, and it splits along lines the elephant walked 20 years ago. His apprentice, a gap-toothed boy from Nicaea, nods solemnly while mixing pigments in tiny shells. The blue comes from lapis lazuli, crushed with virgin's tears, or so the supplier claims. More likely, it's ground stone and marketing genius, but the color glows like captured sky. At the silk looms, Master Sophia's daughters work patterns that would make modern computers weep with envy. Their fingers dance across warp threads dyed with kermes, tiny insects harvested from oak trees, crushed into crimson powder, worth more than silver. The pattern emerging is samit, a compound weave featuring griffins and peacocks locked in eternal combat. Each motif requires 2,400 individual thread crossings, and one mistake ruins the entire panel. The girls learned this craft before they could read, their muscle memory encoding techniques that trace back to Chinese silk roads and Persian court workshops. Historians still argue whether Byzantine weavers invented their patterns or stole them from Sasanian refugees. But the silk doesn't care about provenance. It just wants to be beautiful. A goldsmith hunches over his anvil, hammering a panagia, a pendant cross destined for the patriarch's vestments. The gold came from Nubian mines, refined in Alexandria, then shaped by tools his grandfather forged. He works by feel more than sight, each tap of his hammer guided by decades of experience. The cross will be set with garnets from India and pearls from the Red Sea, creating a miniature cosmos where Earth's treasures converge in sacred geometry. Watch his hands. They move like a pianist's, each finger knowing its role in the symphony of creation. The real magic happens in the enamel workshop, where Master Nikephoros creates cloisonné that rivals anything Fabergé will imagine centuries later. He bends gold wire into cells thinner than spider silk, then fills each compartment with powdered glass mixed with metal oxides, cobalt for blue, chromium for green, tin for opacity, a periodic table of beauty that won't be formally discovered for another 400 years. The piece goes into a furnace heated with charcoal from Pontic oak, where temperatures must be controlled within degrees, or the enamel cracks like a broken heart. A quirky detail: the workshop's apprentices double as spies. Young craftsmen travel between cities, carrying techniques in their heads and gossip in their hearts. Tonight's apprentice goldsmith will journey to Kiev next month, teaching Rus princes how to work niello while reporting back on their military preparations. Art and espionage intertwine like lovers in a Byzantine romance. Each craft guild, a network of information flowing through skilled hands. The afternoon brings a special commission, a silk epitaphios for the emperor's funeral shroud. The design shows Christ's burial, worked in gold thread on purple silk, so dark it seems to absorb light. Master Sophia's eldest daughter, Maria, embroiders the Savior's face with threads spun from actual gold wire, each stitch a prayer for Imperial salvation. The work will take 6 months and cost enough to buy a small village, but some things transcend economics. This isn't just textile art, it's theology made tangible, faith given form through patient fingers and perfect technique. As evening shadows lengthen, you watch a young ivory carver practice on scraps, his chisel removing tiny curls that spiral to the floor like miniature prayers. His current project, a chess piece shaped like a Byzantine emperor, will outlive empires, survive conquests, and eventually rest in a museum where tourists will marvel at its craftsmanship without understanding its cost. But tonight, it's just a boy learning to make beauty from bone, adding his small voice to the eternal conversation between human hands and divine inspiration. You stand on the quay at dawn as the Golden Horn awakens, its waters reflecting a forest of masts from ships that carry the world's dreams in their holds. Genoese galleys bob beside Arab dhows, their crews speaking in tongues that blend like spices in a merchant's pouch. A Venetian galleass creaks against its moorings, its hull scarred from storms that swept down from the Black Sea, carrying tales of Crimean wheat and Trebizond silver. The harbor smells of tar, salt fish, and possibility, that intoxicating scent of commerce that transforms distant lands into tomorrow's profit. Captain Grimaldi adjusts the rigging on his coca, a round-bellied merchant vessel designed to maximize cargo space over speed. His hold contains treasures that read like a medieval shopping list: Flemish wool, English tin, Spanish leather, and, hidden beneath legitimate goods, a few jars of Chinese silk, cocoons, smuggled past Imperial monopolies. Silkworms, he whispers, patting a concealed compartment, worth more than their weight in gold, if you know the right buyers in Florence. The penalty for silk smuggling is death, but Grimaldi's been dodging Byzantine customs for 20 years with a combination of bribes, false manifests, and sheer audacity. A Syrian merchant haggles over freight rates for his cargo of Damascus steel, sword blades wrapped in oiled leather that gleam like captured lightning. The steel's secret lies in woots, ingots from India, their carbon content creating patterns that flow like water frozen in metal. European knights pay fortunes for such weapons, though they'll never understand the metallurgy that makes them superior to Western iron. The merchant's nephew, a sharp-eyed boy of 12, counts coins with the precision of a tax collector while keeping one eye on potential thieves. The morning auction begins as ship's masters display their wares on the dock. A Rus trader from Novgorod unfurls furs that shimmer like liquid shadow, sable, ermine, and Arctic fox pelts that will warm Byzantine nobles through winter's bite. His prices are steep, but the quality speaks for itself. Each pelt represents weeks of hunting in forests where wolves outnumber men and winter lasts 8 months. Beside him, a Bulgar honey merchant offers amphora of liquid gold from hives tended by monks who've perfected apiculture into an art form. The real excitement centers on a Chian ship loaded with mastic, that miraculous resin that flavors wine, preserves meat, and allegedly cures everything from toothache to broken hearts. The captain, a weather-beaten islander whose family has harvested mastic for generations, demonstrates the resin's properties by chewing a piece until it becomes translucent gum. Tears of Chios, he calls it, though botanists know it's simply Pistacia lentiscus, responding to careful cultivation and Mediterranean climate. Still, the mystique sells, and Byzantine merchants bid aggressively for exclusive distribution rights. A quirky detail emerges during the bidding. Several merchants use an early form of double-entry bookkeeping, recording transactions in parallel columns that balance debits against credits. The technique came from Italian banking houses, but Byzantine traders adapted it to track complex, multi-party deals involving currency exchanges, shipping insurance, and seasonal price fluctuations. One Genoese factor demonstrates his ledger system, showing how a single transaction, silk for spices, generates entries across 6 different accounts. Historians still argue whether this mathematical precision enhanced trade or merely made fraud more sophisticated. The afternoon brings drama as customs officials board a suspicious vessel flying Amalfitane colors. Their search reveals contraband that makes everyone whistle. Chinese porcelain hidden beneath grain sacks, each piece wrapped in silk and packed with rice to prevent breakage. The captain claims ignorance, but his nervous sweating suggests otherwise. Porcelain represents the ultimate luxury. Ceramic so fine it's translucent, decorated with cobalt blue that rivals lapis lazuli. A single bowl costs more than most ships, making the hidden cargo worth a small kingdom's ransom. As sunset paints the harbor gold, you watch longshoremen unload the day's final arrival. A Black Sea trader carrying the empire's lifeblood, grain from the Pontic steppes, wheat, barley, and millet cascaded from hemp sacks like edible waterfalls, each grain representing survival for Constantinople's swollen population. Without this steady flow of calories, the city would starve within weeks. The grain trade isn't glamorous like silk or spices, but it's essential, the unglamorous foundation that supports Byzantine civilization's more decorative achievements. The harbor settles into evening rhythms as ships prepare for departure on tomorrow's tide. Captains study weather signs, checking wind direction and cloud formations with the intensity of augurs reading entrails. A favorable breeze could mean the difference between profit and bankruptcy, between reaching port safely and feeding the fishes. Tonight, the Golden Horn cradles dreams of distant shores and foreign gold, its waters reflecting stars that guide merchants toward horizons where fortunes wait to be made. You wake to the sound of bells, not the solemn bronze tongues of Hagia Sophia, but the silver chimes of festival day cascading across Constantinople like audible confetti. Today marks the feast of orthodoxy, when the city sheds its imperial dignity and transforms into a medieval carnival where emperors dance with fishmongers and nuns giggle behind their veils. The streets overflow with humanity drunk on wine, music, and the rare permission to forget that Ottoman cannons lurk beyond the walls. You stumble from your lodgings into a world where sacred and profane waltz together in defiance of approaching doom. The hippodrome thrums with energy as acrobats from Trebizond tumble between the ancient obelisks. A troop of Syrian fire eaters breathes dragons into the morning air, while children shriek with delight, their parents clutching wine cups and pretending to disapprove. The old racing factions, blues and greens, have abandoned chariot rivalry for friendly competition in juggling contests and drinking songs. A green supporter, his face painted emerald, challenges a blue to see who can balance more amphora on his head. Both men are clearly drunk, which makes the spectacle infinitely more entertaining and slightly more dangerous. Street performers claim every corner, their acts ranging from sublime to ridiculous. A Cappadocian storyteller weaves tales of St. George slaying dragons that sound suspiciously like thinly veiled accounts of recent military victories. His dragon breathes Ottoman fire. His princess speaks with a distinctly Byzantine accent, and his moral lessons hit harder than a mace to the skull. Nearby, a dancing bear from the Caucasus performs tricks, while its handler plays a gaida, bagpipe, that sounds like angels with head colds. The bear's costume, a miniature imperial crown and purple cape, suggests either brilliant satire or treasonous mockery, depending on your sense of humor. The food vendors work overtime, their stalls groaning under festival delicacies that appear only during celebrations. You sample kourabiades, dusted with powdered sugar that melts on your tongue like edible snow, then chase them with sumata, an almond drink so sweet it could resurrect the dead. A Pontic baker offers tsureki, bread braided into complex knots that supposedly ward off evil spirits, though the real magic lies in the mahlab, spice that gives each bite a cherry almond perfume. His competitor, a gap-toothed Thracian, counters with galactobueko, custard wrapped in phyllo, so thin you can read scripture through it. The real spectacle unfolds at the palace gates, where Emperor Constantine XI makes his traditional appearance among the people. Protocol demands imperial dignity, but festival tradition requires accessibility, creating a delicious tension that plays out in choreographed spontaneity. The emperor wears simple robes, still silk, still purple, but without the usual complement of pearls and gold thread. He accepts a cup of wine from a fisherman's wife, tastes honey cakes offered by guildmasters, and even attempts a few steps of the Calamatiano dance that has the crowd roaring approval. For one day, the purple-born becomes merely human. Musicians fill every available space with competing melodies that somehow harmonize into urban symphony. A lira player from Crete trades riffs with a centauri virtuoso from Smyrna, their strings creating conversations that transcend language. Drums thunder from a dozen directions. Daouli from Macedonia, tabla from visiting Arabs, and improvised percussion from children banging spoons against cooking pots. The cacophony should be unbearable, but festival magic transforms noise into music, chaos into celebration. A quirky tradition emerges as the day progresses, the Feast of Fools, where social hierarchies temporarily invert. Servants mock their masters through elaborate pantomime, while nobles serve wine to beggars with exaggerated courtesy. A silk merchant finds himself hauling water for a street sweeper who's been crowned Emperor of the Gutters for the afternoon. The role reversals are temporary and symbolic, but they provide a safety valve for social tensions that might otherwise explode into revolution. Historians still argue whether such festivals strengthened imperial authority by providing harmless outlets for dissent, or weakened it by making hierarchy seem arbitrary. As evening approaches, the celebrations reach crescendo with the Dance of the Icons, a procession where religious images are carried through streets lined with cheering crowds. But tonight's procession includes secular elements, portraits of military heroes, images of the city's patron saints, and even a few cheeky representations of popular entertainers. The boundaries between sacred and profane blur as wine flows and inhibitions dissolve. A group of young nobles attempts an impromptu performance of classical drama, their togas improvised from bed sheets, and their delivery hampered by excessive enthusiasm and insufficient sobriety. The final image, you climb to a rooftop as fireworks, Chinese invention, Arab improvement, Byzantine adaptation, explode over the Golden Horn. Each burst illuminates faces turned skyward in wonder, their expressions mixing joy with something deeper, more desperate. Tomorrow brings reality, but tonight belongs to dreams made manifest through wine, music, and the ancient human need to dance in the face of darkness. You run your palm along the weathered marble of the Forum Boarium, where Constantine's column rises like a stone prayer toward heaven, its porphyry drums stacked in defiance of gravity and time. Each ring tells a story, purple stone quarried from Egyptian mountains, shipped across Mediterranean storms, then assembled by engineers who understood that some monuments must outlast the empires that build them. The column's base bears Latin inscriptions worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' fingers, their words barely legible, but their meaning eternal. To Constantine, founder of this city, around you, Constantinople breathes through its stones, each fragment a syllable in civilization's longest conversation. The Hippodrome's obelisk catches morning light, its hieroglyphs still sharp after 3 millennia of weather. Theodosius I stole this needle from Karnak, hauling it across continents to prove that Rome, even New Rome, could command the treasures of pharaohs. The bronze serpent column coils nearby, its 3 heads originally supporting Apollo's tripod at Delphi until Constantine decided Greek gods belonged in his Christian capital. Irony layers like sediment, pagan monuments supporting Christian empire, Egyptian granite witnessing Byzantine prayers, Delphic bronze hearing Turkish conquest. The stones remember everything. They just choose their moments to speak. You trace the carved acanthus leaves on a Corinthian capital, feeling craftsmanship that predates Christ's birth. This particular column came from Ephesus, salvaged from Diana's temple when Christian zeal demanded pagan demolition. But Constantine's architects were pragmatists. Why quarry new marble when Asia Minor offered ready-made masterpieces? The capital's leaves seemed to rustle in morning breeze, their stone foliage more eternal than any living tree. Each curl and tendril required weeks of patient chiseling. Some anonymous sculptors bid for immortality achieved through calcium carbonate and obsessive attention to detail. The Cistern Basilica beckons through a narrow entrance, its vaulted ceiling supported by 336 columns stolen from across the empire. You descend stone steps into aquatic twilight where carp swim between marble forests and water drips with the patience of geological time. 2 Medusa heads serve as column bases, their serpentine hair carved with such skill that even upside down and sideways, they retain power to unnerve. Legend claims they were positioned thus to neutralize their deadly gaze, but more likely, some practical engineer simply needed pedestals the right height and didn't care about mythological orientation. A quirky discovery awaits in the cistern's northwest corner, graffiti carved by medieval visitors. Johannes was here, 1147, shares space with Maria Loves Nikiforos, and what appears to be a crude drawing of a fish, or possibly a very abstract representation of the emperor's nose. These personal marks humanize the monument, proving that even in ages of faith, teenagers felt compelled to immortalize their presence through vandalism. Historians still argue whether such inscriptions represent cultural decline or timeless human nature, expressing itself through available media. Above ground, you explore the remains of the Great Palace, where grass grows between marble tiles that once reflected imperial footsteps. The Chrysotriclinos lies open to sky, its golden dome collapsed into rubble that glitters with mica flakes. Weeds sprout from cracks in the throne room floor, their roots slowly dismantling what human hands assembled. Nature reclaims all empires eventually, but the process takes centuries, giving stones time to absorb the echoes of power, the whispers of conspiracy, the prayers of desperate emperors facing impossible choices. The Million stands at the city's heart, a marble arch marking the point from which all distances in the empire were measured. Its inscription reads, "From here to Rome, 1,000 miles," a reminder that Constantinople always considered itself the true heir to Caesar's legacy. Merchants gather beneath its shadow to negotiate contracts, their voices mixing with the cries of water sellers and the clatter of ox carts. The arch has witnessed 1,000 such scenes. Barbarian ambassadors presenting tribute, pilgrims beginning journeys to Jerusalem, emperors departing for campaigns they'll never survive. Evening light transforms the ruins into something approaching their former glory. Shadows fill the gaps where walls once stood. Imagination supplies missing roofs and vanished splendor. You sit on a fallen capital, watching sunset paint the Bosphorus gold, and understand why Byzantines called their city the God-guarded city. Not because divine protection made it invincible, but because something sacred lives in these stones. The accumulated prayers of 1,000,000 souls, the crystallized dreams of an empire that refused to die quietly. The stones speak if you know how to listen. They whisper of Justinian's ambitions, Heraclius' victories, the iconoclastic fury that smashed faces from frescoes but couldn't destroy faith itself. They remember the weight of imperial purple, the taste of holy chrism, the sound of bronze doors closing on the last emperor's final prayer. Tonight, as Ottoman cannons prepare their morning symphony, the stones hold their breath and wait for history's next chapter to begin. You find Constantine XI in the palace chapel at dawn, kneeling before an icon of Christ Pantocrator, whose golden eyes seem to hold conversations with eternity. The emperor's purple robes pool around him like spilled wine, their silk threads catching candlelight that flickers with each whispered prayer. His hands, unmarked by calluses, despite weeks manning the walls, clasp a rosary of Aegean pearls, each bead a meditation on mortality, each Ave Maria a negotiation with fate. Outside, Ottoman drums thunder like approaching storms, but here in this marble sanctuary, time moves differently, measured not in heartbeats, but in the slow burn of beeswax candles and the patient accumulation of grace. He rises as you enter, his movement betraying the weight of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. At 48, Constantine bears the face of a man who's aged decades in months, lines etched by responsibility, eyes hollowed by the knowledge that he's likely the last of his line. They say Mehmet offers terms, he murmurs, not turning from the icon. Safe passage, a pension in Adrianople, even marriage to one of his sisters. His voice carries no bitterness, only the weary acceptance of a chess player who sees checkmate approaching, but continues moving pieces out of duty rather than hope. The emperor's breakfast arrives on silver plates that once graced Justinian's table. Bread blessed by the patriarch, honey from Mount Athos, wine diluted with water from the Jordan River, or so the palace steward claims. Constantine eats mechanically, his attention fixed on reports from the walls. The Genoese quarter holds firm, but Venetian merchants whisper of ships preparing to flee. Hungarian engineers inspect the great cannon's damage to the outer wall, their faces grim as undertakers measuring coffins. Each dispatch brings news that chips away at hope like water wearing stone. A delegation of nobles enters, their silk robes rustling with nervous energy. They speak of surrender, of negotiation, of the practical wisdom of preserving lives over symbols. The city can be rebuilt, argues the megas logothetes, his voice reasonable as a merchant discussing inventory. But the people, once dead, cannot be restored. Constantine listens without interruption, his fingers tracing the pearl rosary in patterns worn smooth by repetition. When they finish, he speaks quietly. I was born in the purple. I will die in the purple. The city and the emperor are one. The quirky detail emerges during the afternoon council. Constantine has been secretly learning Turkish, studying grammar texts smuggled from Bursa by sympathetic merchants, not for surrender negotiations, but to understand his enemies' prayers, their poetry, their dreams of conquest. Know your opponent's heart, he explains to his startled advisors, and you know whether he'll show mercy or demand blood. His pronunciation remains atrocious. Turkish vowels torture his Greek tongue, but the effort reveals a mind still grappling with possibilities, still seeking advantages in the chess game of empires. As evening approaches, the emperor walks the palace gardens, where peacocks strut between rose bushes planted by Theodora 6 centuries earlier. Their cries pierce the air like beautiful warnings, their tail feathers catching sunset light in displays of defiant beauty. Constantine pauses beside a fountain where water trickles from a marble lion's mouth, its flow powered by aqueducts that predate Islam itself. The sound soothes nerves frayed by cannon fire and the weight of destiny. Here, surrounded by beauty that transcends politics, he finds moments of peace, that make the coming storm bearable. Historians still argue whether Constantine's final weeks revealed heroic stoicism or tragic delusion. Critics point to missed opportunities for negotiation, chances to save lives through pragmatic surrender. Supporters counter that some principles transcend survival, that dying with dignity serves posterity better than living with shame. Tonight, watching him pray before icons painted by monks who believed art could make the divine visible, you suspect both interpretations miss the point. This isn't about heroism or delusion. It's about a man fulfilling the role history assigned him, playing his part in a drama larger than individual choice. The final image, Constantine alone in his study, reading Plutarch's Lives by candlelight. The pages fall open to Marcus Aurelius, whose Meditations offer comfort across centuries. Death smiles at us all, but all a man can do is smile back. The emperor's lips curve slightly as he reads, finding kinship with another ruler who faced impossible odds with philosophical grace. Outside, Ottoman campfires twinkle like fallen stars, but inside this circle of candlelight, the last Byzantine emperor prepares his soul for whatever tomorrow brings, finding strength not in hope of victory, but in the simple dignity of duty fulfilled. You stand on the walls as May 29th dawns clear and still, the kind of morning that makes birds sing louder and flowers bloom brighter, as if nature herself refuses to acknowledge the approaching storm. The Ottoman camp stretches to the horizon like a canvas city painted in crescents and stars, their banners hanging limp in the breathless air. No wind stirs the golden horn's surface, which reflects the sky so perfectly it seems you could step through water into heaven itself. The silence feels pregnant with possibility, not the possibility of victory, for that ship sailed weeks ago, but the deeper possibility of grace under pressure, of dignity preserved in defeat's embrace. The surrender negotiations unfold with surprising gentleness, like a dance between partners who respect each other's steps, even as the music ends. Mehmet II arrives not in the golden armor of conquest, but in simple white robes that catch morning light like snow on distant mountains. His translator, a Greek convert named Halil Pasha, speaks both languages with the fluency of a man who's lived between worlds. The terms are generous, almost embarrassingly so. Citizens who wish to leave may depart with their possessions. Those who stay will enjoy religious freedom under Ottoman protection. Churches will remain churches, at least for now. The Sultan's youth shows in his eagerness to be seen as merciful, to begin his reign with magnanimity rather than massacre. Constantine Eile meets the delegation in the throne room where his ancestors received barbarian kings and Arab caliphs. He wears the simple purple tunic of a working emperor, not the jewel-encrusted regalia of state occasions. His acceptance comes quietly, without drama or theatrical gestures, just a man acknowledging reality with the same grace he might use to accept an invitation to dinner. "The city is yours," he says in careful Turkish, the words he's been practicing in secret. "May God grant you wisdom in its governance. The translator's eyes widen at the emperor's linguistic effort, a small gesture that somehow makes the moment more human, less historically inevitable. The transition happens with surprising order, like a well-rehearsed play where everyone knows their lines. Ottoman janissaries enter through gates opened by Byzantine guards who've laid down their weapons with relief rather than shame. No blood flows in the streets, no buildings burn, no women scream from violated homes. Mehmet has given strict orders. This conquest will be remembered for its restraint, not its brutality. The young sultan understands that empires built on terror rarely outlast their founders, while those founded on justice can endure for centuries. A quirky detail emerges as the day progresses. Many citizens barely notice the change of government. Markets reopen by noon, vendors hawking the same fish and bread they sold yesterday. The new guards speak Turkish instead of Greek, but they accept the same bribes and ignore the same minor infractions. A Genoese merchant jokes that he's been conquered so many times by Crusaders, Venetians, and now Ottomans that he's developed immunity to political upheaval. His customers laugh, their relief palpable as they realize survival doesn't require heroic gestures, just the ancient human talent for adaptation. The most poignant moment comes when Hagia Sophia's bells fall silent for the last time. Not dramatically, not with violent destruction, but simply because no one rings them. The great bronze tongues that called Constantinople to prayer for 9 centuries hang mute as workmen begin the careful process of conversion. Scaffolding rises around Christian mosaics that will be covered, not destroyed, preserved under plaster for future generations to rediscover. The building's acoustics remain unchanged. Only the prayers will sound different. Historians still argue whether this represents cultural death or cultural evolution, but the stones themselves seem indifferent to theological distinctions. Evening brings an unexpected gift. Mehmet orders a feast for both conquerors and conquered, served in the hippodrome where emperors once watched chariot races. Ottoman musicians play alongside Byzantine singers, their melodies intertwining like conversations between old friends. Wine flows freely, the Sultan's youth showing in his willingness to bend Islamic law for diplomatic purposes. A Turkish poet recites verses praising Constantinople's beauty, while a Greek scholar responds with Homer's description of Troy's fall. The parallel isn't lost on anyone, but tonight it feels like literary appreciation rather than political commentary. As stars emerge over the Bosphorus, you watch Constantine XI board a Genoese galley bound for Morea, where he'll live out his days as a pensioned ex-emperor. He carries little, a few books, some family icons, and the pearl rosary that sustained him through the siege. His departure lacks the drama of exile. It feels more like a dignified retirement, a chess master conceding a well-played game. The last Byzantine emperor sails into history not with thunder, but with a gentle splash of oars cutting water that reflects both crescent moon and cross, both ending and beginning, both sorrow and hope made manifest in the eternal dance of empires rising and falling like tides. You descend into the depths beneath Hagia Sophia, where legends whisper of a marble emperor sleeping until his people's darkest hour. The passage winds through foundations older than memory, past cisterns that once held the city's lifeblood, and crypts where patriarchs rest in stone sarcophagi carved with prayers in languages time has forgotten. Your torch flickers against walls that weep with centuries of accumulated moisture, each drop a tear shed for empires that thought themselves eternal. The air tastes of limestone and dreams deferred, of hopes crystallized into myth when reality proved too harsh to bear naked. The chamber opens before you like a stone womb, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows that seem to breathe with their own rhythm. And there he sits, not Constantine XI, though the legend claims his name, but a figure carved from Proconnesian marble, so pure it seems to glow with inner light. The sculptor, some anonymous master whose name history swallowed, captured not just imperial dignity, but something deeper, the patient endurance of a people who've survived conquest after conquest by transforming defeat into story, loss into legend, ending into eternal beginning. The marble emperor's eyes remain closed, his hands folded over a sword whose blade bears inscriptions in Greek letters worn smooth by pilgrims' fingers. When the city needs him most, the inscription reads, when the last church bell falls silent and the final prayer echoes unanswered, then shall the marble king wake and lead his people home. Children have touched this statue for generations, their small hands polishing the stone until it feels warm as living flesh. Each touch carries a prayer, a hope, a refusal to accept that some stories truly end. Around the chamber, other figures wait in stone silence. Generals who never lost battles, they actually fought. Saints whose miracles grew more impressive with each retelling. Emperors whose reigns became golden ages only after their deaths. This is Byzantium's true treasury, not gold or jewels, but the accumulated dreams of a civilization that understood survival sometimes requires believing in impossible things. The statues don't move, don't breathe, don't offer comfort beyond their presence, but presence sometimes is enough. A quirky detail catches your attention. Fresh flowers lie at the marble emperor's feet, their petals still bright with morning dew. Someone has been here recently, maintaining traditions that predate the Ottoman conquest by centuries. The flowers are anemones, wind flowers that bloom briefly but return each spring, their cycles of death and resurrection, a perfect metaphor for empires that refuse to stay buried. Local grandmothers still bring their grandchildren here, whispering stories that begin once upon a time and end until the marble king wakes. The legend adapts with each generation, each telling adding new details while preserving the essential truth that some defeats are really transformations, some endings merely intermissions in longer stories. During the Greek War of Independence, the marble emperor was said to stir in his sleep. When Constantinople became Istanbul, pilgrims claimed his sword grew brighter. Each crisis, each hope, Each moment, when the future seemed uncertain, the legend evolved to meet the need for meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. You trace the inscription with your finger, feeling the weight of centuries in each carved letter. Historians still argue whether such legends represent cultural resilience or dangerous delusion, whether believing in sleeping kings strengthens communities or prevents them from accepting reality. But standing here in this chamber where stone dreams take human form, academic debates seem irrelevant. The marble emperor doesn't need to be literally true to be essentially real. His power lies not in prophecy, but in the human refusal to surrender hope, even when hope seems foolish. The torch burns lower as you prepare to leave, its flame dancing shadows across marble faces that seem to shift and change in the flickering light. For a moment, just a moment, you could swear the emperor's chest rises and falls with sleeping breath, that his fingers twitch against the sword's hilt, that his closed eyes move beneath stone lids, as if watching dreams of futures yet to unfold. But torchlight plays tricks, and legends live in the spaces between seeing and believing, between what is and what might yet be. As you climb back toward the world above, where Ottoman minarets pierce Byzantine sky and Greek voices mingle with Turkish prayers, you carry with you the marble emperor's gift, the knowledge that some stories transcend their endings, that some empires live on in the hearts of those who remember, and that sometimes the most powerful truth is the one that sleeps in stone, waiting for the moment when the world needs dreams more than facts, hope more than history, and the eternal promise that every ending is also a beginning. The marble steps grow warmer beneath your feet as you emerge into Constantinople's eternal twilight, where the last light of Byzantine day meets the first stars of Ottoman night. The city breathes around you with the rhythm of centuries, its pulse steady and sure, despite the changing of empires, the passing of ages, the endless dance of conquest and renewal that marks all human endeavors. You walk slowly now through streets where Greek and Turkish voices blend like streams joining a river, where church bells and minaret calls create harmonies that speak of coexistence rather than conflict. The stones beneath your feet have felt the footsteps of emperors and sultans, saints and scholars, merchants and mystics, all part of the great human story that continues regardless of which flags fly from palace walls. The golden horn reflects stars that witnessed Caesar's ambitions and will outlive every empire yet to come. Water laps against quays where ships from distant lands still dock, their holds filled with spices and silk, dreams and stories, the eternal cargo of human hope carried across seas that connect rather than divide. The city's lights twinkle like earthbound constellations, each window a life, each life a story, each story a thread in the tapestry that weaves past and future into an eternal present. As sleep approaches, with the gentleness of tide returning to familiar shores, you carry with you the whispered promise of the marble emperor, that some things endure beyond empires, that some truths transcend conquest, and that in the end, all stories are one story. The endless human journey from darkness toward light, from fear toward hope, from the known toward the eternal mystery that waits beyond the horizon of dreams. Rest now, knowing that somewhere beneath the city, marble eyes watch over sleeping worlds, and tomorrow will bring new chapters to stories that never truly end.